Good morning. You're listening to the Brief Wake Up, your mindful start to the day. I am Handel, your daily coffee companion, helping you wake up informed, thoughtful, and maybe just a little amused before the day gets old. If you're commuting, corralling kids, or just standing in line for caffeine, you're in the right place. Let's get you caught up. Starting with health. A lot of health trends come and go, but few have survived as long, or as misleadingly, as the juice cleanse. It sounds clean, it sounds natural, it sounds like something your body should want. But here's the reality. A juice cleanse is not a reset, not a detox, and not a shortcut to gut health. In fact, it does almost the opposite of what people believe it does. Let's define it clearly. A juice cleanse is a short-term plan, usually 1 to 3 days, where you drink only fruit and vegetable juices and eliminate solid food completely. No fiber, no protein, no dietary fat, very low calories, and none of the nutrients that stabilize digestion or support a healthy microbiome. And that's where the trouble starts. First, you lose the fiber your gut depends on. Juicing strips out the fiber that feeds your beneficial gut bacteria. Without it, those microbes lose their fuel source, and the microbiome shifts quickly. Studies show that even brief juice fasts can increase bacteria linked to inflammation, leaky gut, and impaired cognition. Fiber is also how your gut produces short-chain fatty acids, the compounds that protect the intestinal lining. When fiber disappears, inflammation risk rises. Second, your blood sugar becomes unstable. Juices are high in sugar but almost devoid of protein or fat. That combination causes rapid spikes and crashes in blood glucose. For some people, that means irritability, headaches, dizziness, and intense hunger. For anyone with diabetes, prediabetes, or reactive hypoglycemia, those swings can be dangerous and can worsen metabolic instability long after the cleanse ends. Third, digestive symptoms often get worse, not better. People expect a cleanse to give the gut a break, but biology doesn't work that way. Without fiber, constipation is common. But the high sugar load causes others to develop loose stools. And many popular juice ingredients, apples, pears, and mangoes are high in short-chain carbs that are poorly absorbed and ferment rapidly in the gut. That triggers gas, bloating, cramping, and abdominal pain, especially for people with IBS. Fourth, juices can aggravate acid reflux. Citrus-heavy blends like orange, lemon, and pineapple are highly acidic. When you drink them repeatedly without food to buffer the stomach, reflux symptoms often intensify. Heartburn, chest discomfort, throat irritation, all more common during a cleanse. Fifth, juice cleanses can be unsafe for people with underlying conditions. Gastroenterologists warn that juice-only diets can cause electrolyte imbalances, kidney stones, nutrient deficiencies, and hypoglycemia. That makes them particularly risky for people with IBS or IBD, reflux disease, diabetes, eating disorders, kidney issues, or anyone who is pregnant, breastfeeding, underweight, or malnourished. And here's the bottom line, backed by decades of physiology. The body does not detox through deprivation. Your liver and kidneys detox continuously, not because you stop eating, but because you give them the nutrients they need to function. So, if the goal is better gut health, the path is not restriction. The path is nourishment. Doing so by eating whole fruits and vegetables, not juice. Prioritizing fiber from beans, lentils, oats, nuts, and greens. Keeping blood sugar stable. Maintaining a healthy weight and managing underlying GI issues with real medical care. juice can be part of a healthy diet. A juice cleanse, however, is far more likely to disrupt your gut than repair it. The news is next. We begin this morning's news in Minneapolis, where a federal immigration operation ended with the fatal shooting of a woman. This has ignited a clash between local leaders and federal authorities. The incident unfolded Wednesday in South Minneapolis during an enforcement action involving U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. Agents were attempting to stop a vehicle driven by 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good, a Minneapolis resident and mother of 3. What happened next is at the center of the controversy. Federal officials say Good's SUV moved toward agents as they approached from multiple angles, prompting one officer to open fire in what they describe as self-defense. Good was struck multiple times and died at the scene. ICE maintains that the agent acted to protect himself and others nearby. But local officials, including Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are challenging that narrative. They argue the video circulating online raises major questions about the necessity and proportionality of the force used. In that footage, multiple agents are seen surrounding the vehicle, shouting conflicting commands and firing at close range as the car inches forward. Community members say Good was not a threat and that the operation itself was unnecessarily aggressive. Crowds gathered near the shooting site Wednesday night, holding a vigil and calling for accountability. The location, just blocks from where George Floyd was killed in 2020, adds another layer of pain and sensitivity to a community already familiar with high-profile police violence. Federal authorities say this operation was part of a broader ICE enforcement surge in Minneapolis, focused on locating individuals with outstanding deportation orders. But the presence of federal agents in residential neighborhoods without advanced coordination with city leadership has been a source of rising tension. Mayor Frey publicly demanded that ICE pull back, saying their tactics are destabilizing and creating fear far beyond their intended targets. The investigation is now being handled by the FBI and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which will review body camera footage, bystander videos, and statements from agents and witnesses. They have not yet said whether the shooting meets the legal standard for justified use of force. The Department of Homeland Security is standing by the agent involved, but acknowledged the situation remains fluid as evidence is analyzed. Meanwhile, local leaders continue to press for full transparency and are calling for reconsideration of how and when federal teams operate within Minneapolis. We'll track developments throughout the day, potential charges, the release of additional video, and how this incident may reshape the relationship between local authorities and federal immigration enforcement going forward. Tech and culture is next. In our music series, we've already uncovered 4 core truths about music and us. First, music is older than language. Second, music stores memory as physiological state. Third, rhythm regulates the nervous system. Fourth, music communicates emotional meaning without relying on words. Taken together, they lead us to a simple but powerful conclusion. Music organizes experience. Humans do not perceive life as one long continuous stream. We segment it. The brain breaks time into beginnings, transitions, turning points, and outcomes. It has to. Without structure, the volume of sensory input would overwhelm us. But structure alone is not enough. The brain also needs context. Moments require emotional interpretation, so the brain can decide where they belong and how important they are. That is where music steps in. A song gives a moment shape. It provides a defined starting point and a clear end. It gives emotional direction, tension rising or tension resolving. It creates continuity from one experience to the next, and it marks the moment with a distinct internal signature the brain can retrieve later. This is why ordinary moments can suddenly feel significant when music is present. The brain attaches the moment to the feeling the music generates, creating a clear psychological label. It's also why specific songs lock onto specific periods of life. The song is not just something you heard during that time, it becomes the organizing principle of that time. When your brain stores the memory, it stores the state the music helped generate. Years later, hearing that track doesn't just trigger nostalgia, it reconstructs the physiological and emotional conditions of that chapter. Your breathing changes, your posture shifts, your internal tempo adjusts toward the state you were in back then. This mechanism explains why we create playlists for eras, not just genres. We don't label them rock, classical, or EDM. We label them senior year, the breakup, first apartment, or that summer. We treat music as a narrative container because that is what it becomes. A way for the brain to compress, store, and retrieve entire periods of life efficiently. Technology has adapted to this reality. Streaming platforms no longer organize music primarily by musical category. They organize it by scenario: focus, confidence, recovery, late night driving. These labels reflect exactly how the brain uses music, not for entertainment, but for context. Music reduces ambiguity. It stabilizes emotional interpretation. It connects isolated moments into a coherent sequence, and it preserves identity continuity over long stretches of time. That's why life sometimes feels cinematic, not because the moment is dramatic, but because the music you choose gives it structure, meaning, and emotional direction. Music isn't background, it's architecture. It's the framework your brain uses to understand the story you're living. Tomorrow we close this segment with music as our anchor of self and who we are as individuals. The lighter roast is next. I've been thinking about how much trouble we create for ourselves by reacting too fast. Not reacting badly, not reacting loudly, just reacting quickly, before we've taken a breath, taken perspective, or taken in the full situation. We talk a lot about the cost of not speaking up. We almost never talk about the cost of speaking too soon. And the truth is, most of the fires we fight in relationships, at work, at home, we started them ourselves. Not intentionally, but because we reacted from emotion instead of context. We responded to the first version of the story, not the real one. We filled in blanks with fear or frustration, and then acted as if our assumptions were facts. That's why the old phrase, "let cooler heads prevail," is more than just advice. It's a safety mechanism. It protects you from the version of yourself that responds in the moment, before the information is clear and the adrenaline settles. Because once adrenaline shows up, perspective disappears. And perspective is everything. Perspective is the ability to ask, is this actually a problem? Is this really about me? What else could be going on with the other person? What do I not know yet? That tiny pause, that 2-second reset, often reveals that the situation is not nearly as dramatic as it felt at first contact. The delay gives your brain enough space to shift from threat response to actual reasoning. The event didn't change, your vantage point did. And that shift saves you from the biggest trap in conflict, reacting to your own interpretation instead of reacting to reality. This is why people who stay calm aren't passive. They're skilled. They understand that intensity is contagious, and so is composure. They understand that the loudest person in the room isn't the strongest one. It's usually the least regulated. Cooler heads don't prevail because they're quieter. They prevail because they can see the situation from more angles than the person who's spiraling. So before you react, before the text, the tone, the email, or the decisions, give yourself the space to get perspective. Slow down enough for your reasoning to catch up to your emotion. Because overreaction always feels justified in the moment. It's only later that we see the damage we didn't need to create. And that's the whole point. Most conflicts don't need a hero. They just need a pause. Our commemoration is next. Today is January 8th, and it's one of those dates where history didn't just happen, it pivoted. We start in 1815 at the Battle of New Orleans. On this day, Andrew Jackson's forces defeated the British in one of the final battles of the War of 1812. The victory was so decisive and so emotionally important to the early United States that January 8th was once celebrated as a national holiday. It faded over time, but the symbolism remains. A young country discovering it could defend itself. Jump ahead a century and a half to 1964, when President Lyndon B. Johnson stepped to the podium and declared an unconditional war on poverty. It reshaped federal domestic policy and remains one of the most ambitious legislative missions in the modern American history. Whether you agree with the outcomes or not, the speech marked a turning point in how the country thought about opportunity, inequality, and responsibility. But the day goes back even further in American governance. On January 8, 1790, George Washington delivered the first State of the Union address. No TV cameras, no applause lines, just a president outlining the condition of the nation and the challenges ahead. The format evolved, but the tradition and the expectation of accountability started on this exact date. January 8th also carries weight globally. The African National Congress was founded on this day, a major milestone in South Africa's political history and the beginning of a long struggle that would eventually dismantle apartheid. And in 1994, cosmonaut Valery Polyakov launched into what would become the longest continuous space mission in human history, more than 14 months aboard the Mir space station. A reminder of how far human endurance can stretch. It's also a remarkable birthday roll call. Stephen Hawking was born today in 1942. Elvis Presley born today in 1935, and David Bowie born today in 1947. Three icons who radically expanded what we believed was possible in science, in culture, and in identity. And then, on a lighter note, today is also National Bubble Bath Day, a full day dedicated to slowing down, letting the water carry some of the weight, and remembering that restoration is just as important as ambition. A small reminder that balance matters, even on a day packed with history. So January 8th gives us a lot at once: military triumph, social policy, political tradition, global struggle, scientific endurance, cultural brilliance, and a moment of calm in the middle of it all. A day worth noticing. Today's show was about clarity, in health, in judgment, and in how we interpret the world around us. We look at how juice cleanses create the illusion of renewal, how the Minneapolis ice shooting reveals the danger of reacting without full context, and how music quietly structures our perception of life's moments whether we notice it or not. And as we reflect on the importance of slowing down, taking perspective, and understanding the deeper story, we close by remembering January 8th, a day that has shaped American history, global movements, scientific breakthroughs, and even reminds us, with Bubble Bath Day, that restoration matters just as much as action. This is Dr. Robinson for the Brief Wake Up. Stay calm, kind, and curious. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.